tonight.
What we now see is a brutality that we haven't seen in Europe since the Second World War.
As more is learned about the alleged atrocities in Bucha, the Ukrainian president pleads for more help from the rest of the world, plus a shortage of cybersecurity experts in America.
We've got a lot of gaps that have to be filled.
What's being done to close those gaps and keep our cyber infrastructure safe, and how legalized sports betting is giving rise to potential gambling addictions. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. Claims of worst atrocities since World War II. Good evening in Washington, I'm Jenna Browder. At least 300 civilians found dead. A massacre on the outskirts of Kyiv that's led to calls for a war crimes trial. The question now, how will the world go about holding Russia accountable? The U.S. has promised more sanctions, but Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky wants more, telling the United Nations Security Council today it's time to reform the world security system. Matt Galka here with more. Matt, the UN Security Council has 5 permanent members, Russia being one of them, but that didn't seem to deter Zelensky.
Jenna, no, it certainly did not. The Ukrainian president made a very passionate plea to the UN Security Council, telling them today to basically do something as the war between Russia and Ukraine rages on. He detailed the graphic images that have come out of the Kyiv suburbs in places like Bucha, a place where Ukraine says civilians, including families, were mercilessly killed by Russian forces. Some were apparently tied up and shot at close range. He also warned that there would likely be more of those discoveries as Russian troops withdraw from areas around the country. He then called for the UN to reform that Security Council.
Ladies and gentlemen, are you ready to close the UN? Do you think that the time of international law is gone? If your answer is no, then you need to act immediately. The UN Charter must be restored immediately. The UN system must be reformed immediately.
The council was shown a powerful video showing some of the graphic images of dead Ukrainians. Russia holds key veto power on the UN Security Council, something Zelensky was calling for a reform over.
Matt, how did Russia respond, and what's next for Ukrainian allies?
Well, just judging by the landscape, Russia responded in a typical Russia way. The ambassador repeated a lot of the rhetoric coming from Moscow, alleging the images of the atrocities were faked or staged, and saying that the Ukrainian government was run by Nazis. As for the response, a new round of sanctions are coming from Europe and the United States. Europe's sanctions will hit Russia's coal exports and more assets. The U.S. is expected to announce new sanctions tomorrow that would ban new investments in Russia.
What we've seen in Bucha is not the random act of a rogue unit. It's a deliberate campaign to kill, to torture, to rape, to commit atrocities. The reports are more than credible. The evidence is there for the world to see.
Secretary of State Tony Blinken is meeting in Belgium this week with members of NATO to talk more about the war crimes case being built against Russia and more sanctions. Jenna?
Matt Galka. All right, thank you, Matt. Well, as war rages in Eastern Europe, the United States is shoring up its defenses, especially against the threat of a cyber attack. One issue standing in the way, a lack of qualified candidates to fill open cybersecurity jobs. National Security Correspondent Caitlin Burke reports on the challenges to building a corps of cyber warriors.
Cyber protection is no longer optional. The future is now, and the war in Ukraine has escalated the threat of destructive ransomware attacks to an all-time high.
Think about the effect of one piece of malware. Russia literally has not tens or hundreds, but thousands of cyber tools that they could launch.
We're very, very focused on ransomware actors that might conduct attacks against our allies or our nation. Very, very focused on some type of cyber activity that's designed for perhaps Ukraine that spreads more broadly into other countries. Third is any type of attack that an adversary would conduct against an ally, and then finally, certainly our critical infrastructure.
As the U.S. focuses on defense, private businesses and government agencies alike are on the offense, trying to hire nearly 600,000 people for cybersecurity.
We've got a lot of gaps that have to be filled, and there are a lot of holes that can be exploited by malicious actors in cyberspace.
Jason Blessing, a cybersecurity expert with the American Enterprise Institute, says when it comes to this critical area, public and private sectors share the responsibility of protecting national security. A breakdown on either end could have dire consequences.
In today's society, everything is connected, everything is interdependent, and therefore everything is potentially vulnerable.
Jen Easterly heads up CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. Tasked with key roles such as prevention and emergency response, Easterly struggles to keep her agency fully staffed.
We've done a careful analysis of all of the 20-plus steps that it takes to actually hire somebody into the federal government, which is way too onerous. We were able to reduce by 13% the number of days that it takes to hire somebody, but it's still way too long. It's over 200.
Another challenge, competing with private sector salaries.
At the end of the day, people want to come to CISA to defend their nation. But given the competitive environment, we also want to be able to pay closer to market.
Still, experts say the biggest overall problem is there aren't enough qualified people to fill all the open positions.
In 2019, in the US, you had about a bit less than 50,000 people who has been graduate from a master in computer science. And basically, if you want to do cybersecurity, you need to have this kind of skills.
The numbers just don't add up. 50,000 people to fill nearly 600,000 jobs. So the tech industry is trying to help fill the void. Microsoft, for example, is providing free cybersecurity curriculum to all public community colleges.
Basically, 70% of all the students in the US are in community college. So community colleges have a very strong role to be able to provide enough training, enough learning to learners to be able to fulfill the workforce.
Kwame Yamyani noticed another problem is finding experienced educators to teach these skills.
The problem is if you live, for example, in the Bay or in the Peninsula in California, and you are really good in computer science, you get to get a six-figure job somewhere, like at Facebook or Google or whatever. So why you would be, I would like to say, a teacher in a community college?
Yamyani's company, Quasar, provides courses for community college instructors, enabling them to teach what's needed to their students.
Our job is to be able to provide to anybody a sufficient enough of training to have at least all the basics required to be able to protect our free world.
The hard reality is that there's no immediate fix. In the meantime, however, the average American can be an important first line of defense against a cyber attack.
You want to make sure that your online presence is scrubbed well. So this means enabling multi-factor authentication, either through text message or temporary links for your banking or other online services, using a password manager that utilizes local encryption so that you can just plug it into your browser and it will secure and help you have stronger passwords, and just be mindful of when and where and from whom you get messages.
According to Deloitte, 91% of cyber attacks start with a phishing email, a message designed to trick unsuspecting employees into divulging sensitive information. So the bottom line is that protecting sensitive data is no longer the sole responsibility of highly trained cybersecurity professionals. It's a job that falls to all of us. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
All right, thank you, Caitlin. Well, drivers across the country are beginning to feel some relief at the pump. The average price of gas down an average of about 5 cents last week. According to tracking site GasBuddy, there are several factors contributing to the decline. The price of oil dropped to $100 a barrel, lowering gas prices with it. And President Biden announced a release of oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve starting in May. Still, prices remain historically high. During a Senate Commerce Committee hearing today, Senator Ted Cruz cast the blame squarely on the president, pointing out that gas prices have been climbing since the day he took office.
The Biden administration has waged a war on supply, and prices have skyrocketed. This is not an accident. This is not Putin. This is Joe Biden and the Democrats and the Green New Deal, and they're desperately looking for a political excuse to blame somebody else for the consequences of what they promised they would do to the American people.
And the average for a gallon is currently at about $4.17. All right, let's go ahead and bring in CBN News chief political analyst David Brody. David, so Quinnipiac out with a poll last week that found 41% of Americans blame the Biden administration for these high gas prices. The administration will say it's oil companies, lining their pockets, the war in Ukraine, the Putin price hike. Is it fair for Senator Cruz to lay the blame squarely on the president?
Well, I think it's fair to lay some of the blame on the president for sure. Look, the president doesn't control gas prices, but he does control policy. And I think that's what Ted Cruz was talking about here, Jenna. I mean, look, let's look at this in two segments here for a moment. OK, there was the war in Ukraine, and then boom, we saw the uptick. More than an uptick, a big spike in gas prices. But before that, gas prices were still out of control. We go back to the Trump administration. They were in what, $2.50, $2.60, somewhere around there, maybe $2.70. They were always in the $3.10, 15, 20 cent range anyhow under Biden before the war in Ukraine, and now we're up at $4 a gallon. So this idea about the Republican talking point about American energy independence is a valid one. And of course, you're not going to be able to ever quantify it and quantitatively prove it specifically. But I think it gives Republicans a very strong talking point. And the bottom line is it hurts Biden politically, no doubt about it.
Yeah, and it does seem like the American people certainly do cast a lot of the blame on him. Yeah. Switching gears here, the Senate has a deal on a COVID aid bill. David, less than half of what the White House wanted, but the president still says he will support it. Your thoughts on that and why the president wouldn't put up more of a fight to get what he wanted?
Well, probably because he knows he's going to get another $5–10 billion down the road, potentially when there's a new variant, or the Senate will come back. I mean, Mitt Romney's even said, look, we might have to come back again and get some more money. And so, look, I think they punted that fight down the road. Of course, there was always this fight over this kind of global fund for vaccinations worldwide, which is not in the bill. And so, Republicans see this as a victory because, one, that's not in the bill. And two, the money that's being spent, this $10 billion, is part of unused stimulus funds. And of course, that's something that Republicans will consider a victory. And it's not new money we're talking about. It's already money that's been approved.
We should mention Mitt Romney is the chief negotiator for the GOP on that. He said today that it doesn't look like that's going to happen this week, but we'll stay tuned. Michigan Congressman Fred Upton today, David, announcing he won't seek re-election. Upton, of course, one of the 10 House Republicans who voted to impeach President Trump. He has served a long time, since 1987. What will his legacy be?
Well, let's remember Fred Upton was one of the 10 House Republicans that voted to impeach President Trump. And as Donald Trump let everybody remember today, he said 4 down, 6 to go, as in 4 have already retired, including Upton. 6 more President Trump hopes will get there eventually. But look, in terms of the legacy for Fred Upton, people would call him a statesman. Of course, statesman is a dirty word today in politics. If you're called a statesman, it's another word for a rhino, in essence. And that's where our politics has gone to. It used to be the days of Dick Lugar from Indiana. Oh, he's such a statesman. Oh, today Dick Lugar will be run out of the Republican Party. And so that's exactly, in essence, what's happening to Fred Upton. He'll call it redistricting. Hey, let's take a step back, okay? He was going to have a tough primary. Already Trump had endorsed his opponent. So that was going to be tough sledding for Upton for sure.
Yeah, redistricting sure to be a big issue in November for a lot of different races. All right, David Brody, we will leave it there. Thank you so much. Great to see you.
You too.
Well, addiction in America, how millions of Americans struggle with gambling. Next on Faith Nation. More than $3 billion. That's how much Americans spent gambling on the NCAA basketball tournament this year. That is a record-breaking figure, driven mainly by the rise in legalized sports betting. The rise coming as 10 million Americans live with a gambling addiction. CBN's Brady Carter shows us how that is harmful for individuals, families, and society.
Now I can bet the game on FanDuel Sportsbook anywhere in Pennsylvania.
The ads seem to come from all directions, and legalized sports betting opened the floodgates. The industry is booming, with more than $52 billion wagered last year alone.
Sports wagering is a bad bet for everyone.
In 30 states, D.C. and Puerto Rico have given the okay, providing access to numerous available betting platforms. Paul Ventura, with Focus on the Family, says, as this encouragement to gamble grows, so do the problems.
for Christians, it's a particularly nefarious thing. As believers, we're called to serve the poor. And what does gambling do? It actually exploits the poor. As Christians, we're called to love our neighbor. But what does gambling do? It only works. We only win if the other guy loses.
This year's March Madness will generate the most betting in tournament history. Some 45 million Americans expected to wager more than $3 billion.
We're also encouraged to work for our wages and not to expect something for nothing. But that's sort of the exact opposite of what gambling is.
Still, Christians aren't universally against it. Not even 40% think sports betting is morally wrong, according to Lifeway research. So Christian leaders hope to uncover gambling's ugly truth and teach God-honoring ways to protect your money and family.
The fact is, most people who gamble lose.
Reports show apps like Skybet, one of the industry's most popular, have adopted invasive tracking and profiling techniques to identify problem gamblers.
God gives us free will. If you want to do that and throw your money away, be my guest. But I would suggest go through the biblical stewardship course. Find out what God's word has to say about this issue.
Art Ally, founder of the Timothy Plan, approach to mutual funds, says to break the chains of gambling, we first need to learn the biblical approach to handling money. That can lead to growing wealth in healthy ways. To help, he's giving away this resource and 9-hour course on his website, timothyplan.com.
All you have to do is click on it. It is free. We don't charge anybody for it. It's our gift to the body of Christ. Because the problem we have is all of our training in handling money, no matter what aspect of money, comes from the world, not the church in general.
Art says the church's approach to stewardship in general is giving, which is why he's teaching about spending, saving, and investing with integrity to hopefully transform lives. Brody Carter, CBN News.
Thank you, Brody. Well, a glitch in the Affordable Care Act is getting a closer look from the Biden administration. The president signed an executive order today to fix part of the Obamacare that's been preventing some Americans from getting health care subsidies.
Once today's proposed rule is finalized, starting next year, working families in America will get the help they need to afford full family coverage. Everyone in the family.
And former President Obama, as you saw, was there for the occasion. The move will take effect in January and allows eligible families with employer-based health insurance to receive tax credits for their families if the cost of coverage exceeds more than 10% of their income. The Treasury Department says some 200,000 uninsured people will gain coverage, and it will lower premiums for 1 million others. Rescuing Ukrainians with special needs, how one American is helping the handicapped during the Russian invasion. Welcome back. While millions of Ukrainians are fleeing the fighting, not everyone can pick up and go. As Charlene Aaron reports, one American minister is doing whatever she can to help rescue those with disabilities and special needs trapped in the war-torn country.
More than 50 years ago, a diving accident left Johnny Erickson Tata in a wheelchair, unable to walk. Since then, she has been a strong advocate for people with disabilities. Her latest work, rescuing those stuck in Ukraine since Russia invaded the country. She told us on CBN's Prayer Link about the difficulties many have been facing, calling their plight horrific.
Just imagine if you're a quadriplegic like me. I can't use my hands. I'm in a wheelchair. And if you were on the 7th floor of an apartment building and you were in Mariupol being bombed and there were rocket strikes, it's not like you can jump out of bed, grab a few things, rush out the front door and make a dash for the border. You can't do that. And so a lot of these people with disabilities are stuck in apartment buildings. A lot of them are in basements.
She explained how her ministry is helping get many out.
We've been working with our in-country partner, Galena. Galena and our teams have been out searching for these people, even in the most dangerous eastern parts of Ukraine, to rescue them and get them across the border and to safe haven in not only Poland, but Germany and the Netherlands. And we've evacuated over 300 people with disabilities thus far. and caregivers, and we're still active.
Just before the invasion, construction was to begin on a disability center in Ukraine called Johnny's House, designed to meet the spiritual, physical, economic, and social needs of people living with disabilities. While the war forced the ministry to redirect its efforts, it hasn't stopped the outreach.
We quickly pivoted, and all the concrete, all the cement, the cinder blocks, the lumber, everything ready to go for the construction of Johnny's House in Ukraine, we suddenly reallocated and redirected to be used to shore up homes and care facilities for the elderly, to protect people with disabilities. So those items all were put to good use, not in constructing a Johnny's House, but of course barricading people so that they might have a safe haven.
A path no doubt filled with danger.
But just the Christians who are volunteering to drive these buses along the corridors where there is heavy shelling, even the drivers of these vans are taking a great risk.
Meanwhile, Johnny is encouraging believers to pray for those helping with rescue efforts in Ukraine.
These people are exhausted, shell-shocked, but nevertheless, they're practicing Christianity with its sleeves rolled up. And so please pray for Galina and her network of friends and co-workers who are making the valiant and very brave and courageous efforts to go into the most dangerous parts, find these people with disabilities, and bring them to safety.
Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
Finally tonight, a thriller in New Orleans. The Kansas Jayhawks overcoming a 16-point deficit, winning the NCAA basketball title over the University of North Carolina, with the final score 72-69. It's the largest come-from-behind victory in the history of the championship. Jayhawk forward Mitch Lightfoot calling the whole experience a blessing.
Coach had a great message for us, and he challenged us to be better and to have more pride, and we did that. I was super blessed to be a part of this group.
And the Kansas Jayhawks were crowned the national champions for the 4th time. Now the Rock Chalk champions head into off-season as favorites to win it all again next season. And a big congratulations to them and, of course, the Jayhawk fans. Have a great night.